In this video, we are going to be looking at self-joins, and we're going to be looking at an example of where we may use self-joins. Now, if you've been a long-time subscriber to this YouTube channel, you have seen plenty of examples of where I use self-joins, but there isn't anything in SQL Basics that covered these up to this point, so I'm going to go ahead and cover an example of these. So let's look at, this is going to be a different table than what we've been using so far. We have this table called self table, and we see there's 5 values, and we see with each of these 5 values there's a val column, and that val column is 10, 12, 11, 14, 18. So it doesn't always increase, but sometimes it does. So one of the uses of a self-join is if we want to look at next or previous values. So if we think about, let's suppose that we were looking at value 3, and we want to know, so we're looking at this val on this ID of 3, so that's 11, and we want to know what is the next value after 3, right? So it's going to be, this val value is going to be 14, right? So we're on 3, but we want to know what that next val data point is going to be, which is 14. And so this is where one of the applications where we can use self-joins. So let's go ahead and first of all, let's do a self-join. And we will do here. And I'm going to go ahead and alias it as table 1. I'm going to inner join on the table itself. And it's table 2 on t1.id equals t2.id. So if I run this, it's going to be straightforward across. We're going to see that the columns in table 1, of course, line up with the columns in table 2. Makes sense. So using our example, if we want to know, we're looking at these data here, and we're looking at ID 1 and val, but we want to see what this value is here, which would be this ID here. Right? And the same thing, if we were here, we want to know what these next values, what this value is, not the 3. So how would we go about doing that? Well, one of the ways we could accomplish that is with these self-joins. So if we're on, let's just take 1 here. If we're on ID 1 in table 1, we know that 1 equals 1. So we're going to have it to where the ID equals ID, but we want this value here to equal this value. Well, so we're going to apply algebra. In order to get 2 to equal 1, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 1 from this ID. So what we're going to say here is, and we're joining the same table, that's why it says the self-join here, is we're saying join on this self-table T1, which we're alias, join on itself, but when we're joining on itself, this alias T2, have the ID minus 1. So where this is 1, this ID is going to be whatever this ID is minus 1, which is going to wipe out this 1 because 1 minus 1 is 0, so we're going to start here. So if I run this query now, what we see is 1, 2, we see 2, 3, we see 3, 4, okay? So again, using a practical example, and I've done this plenty of times on this channel, but we'll go ahead and do it here just to show where we would use this. So we're wanting to compare the value. So we have the new value, that's going to be t2 val, and we have the old value, which is t1.val. So we can compare that. That's going to get us the difference. But of course, we're not just looking for the difference. We also want to look at this here divided by the t1.val. So we're getting the difference change, and then we're going to multiply that times 100, and that's going to tell us the change in percent. And of course, that makes sense because these are all integers. So if I do cast as, and this is the fun thing about live coding, guys. All right, 3, we'll just do 6. All right. Okay. And there we go. And hold on 1 second. And then just because I'm paranoid about math, I'm like, is that really true? So I was trying to remember what the numbers were right off the top of my head. 10 to 12, yes, that would be 2 divided by 10, that's 20%. Yeah, that's 1 divided by 12 is definitely 8.3. 11, 3 divided by 11. I'm not that fast at math, but that looks right. And then, of course, that looks right as well. So what we've done here is we've been able to look at the next value because we're doing a self-join. Keep in mind, we could also look at a previous value if you wanted to do that as well. But this is one of the benefits of self-joins, or one of the functionalities we can use in self-joins. Again, there are other things that we can do with it, but this is one of the frequent tools that you'll use this for when you're trying to look at, let's say, a previous or next value.